And I also teach at the Fashion Institute of Technology, and I do have my own practice. I'm a consultant in this field. So today, the question was related to the connection of well-being and the physical environment. And it's a big umbrella, so I will just make some few remarks that deal with this issue. So what I wanted to focus on, what I'm focusing on, is basically this interaction of the built environment and well-being, particularly in a contemporary experience. So we know that there are certain changes, and I will just briefly touch on the research that addresses these particular conditions that we are living today. So we know that we're becoming more urban, more indoor and mediated, and I'll explain that in a second, but basically these are conditions that are increasing rapidly. Most of us are moving to the cities, as you know, as you know, I'm doing a little bit of work on the United Nations, so I follow some of the data that comes from the United Nations. But you've probably heard this multiple times before, that we are exponentially moving into the cities. So we're all migrating into the cities. And just as an example, in 1950, a lot of the population was, about 30% of the population was urban. And as time has gone by, it is projected that by 2050, 70%, or 68% of us will be living in a major urban center. So that's one aspect. Will be living, will be urban, or a huge portion of us will be urban. We're also spending a lot of time indoors, and this is a data that is mentioned a lot in the research for those of you who follow it, so I put it in there. I'm sure I could have found a more recent chart, but we know that at least in the US, about 90% of our time is spent indoors, and that includes transportation, work, entertainment, and home. So we are indoor, and we know, again, this is data from Nielsen, and they're very optimistic about how much TV we watch, but there are other sources that also point out to the fact, and we're all aware of this from our daily life, that we spend a lot of time in what some of the research that I like to quote calls mediated interactions, right? So this mediated experience, which is mediated by whether a computer, by the internet. So we're looking at screens for that long. I didn't see it's estimated about 11 hours a day, which is a lot of time. So what are these particular environmental stressors that these particular conditions bring, or what are the ones that are highlighted generally by these conditions? So I'm just highlighting a few. We talked about density, the issue of isolation and crowding. Both of them have been researched in the urban environment. We are both having crowding as a stressor, and at the same time, the type of environment that we live in the city, in high-rise housing, seems to increase the sense of isolation. We also, by the fact that we live indoors, we're having an issue with the connection to natural elements. We are less exposed to daylight, and there's a lot of research on the impact of that in our well-being and physical health. And we're also exposed to less natural ventilation and, of course, nature, which I'll talk in a minute, additionally, due to the internet-based interactions that we deal with, there's another impact that in well-being, and again, the literature is enormous, but I particularly have done research on the confusion between private and public boundaries and the impact that has with communication and relationships, and how we sense the risk of to our privacy. As well as there's research on information overload and what that does. There's a lot of information in the city that we have to deal with, and there's the whole notion of how to restore from that, and the fact that there's huge demands on attention in the urban environment and in mediated space, both conditions. So I'm just going to mention briefly some of the things that we know about and that we can do about this particular condition. So we have the possibility, we are very social and interrelational, so I'm going to emphasize the potential benefit to well-being from connections, right? Connections to people and community, connection to nature, and connection to place. And they all have been mentioned also this morning. So what do we do in terms of connection to people and community? We know from research, and we can address this through design, spaces that encourage social interaction and togetherness may increase social capital. I don't want to run out of time, but there are multiple studies that have looked at this. Increased collaboration. There was a study about 4 years ago about collaboration at MIT among scientists, and it was shown that the physical space was having an impact on that. Promotes social cohesion, and also we have research on the sense of engagement, civic engagement and community engagement that can be impacted by spaces that enhance social interaction. When we talk about connection to nature and possibilities and the relationship to well-being, again, the literature on this is enormous. So we do know that green spaces, parks and natural environments can lower stress levels, can reduce depression and anxiety, can increase positive effects. There's research that they do encourage physical activity. And of course, there's seminal research on how even views of the natural environment in a hospital can promote healing. And there's the theory of attention restoration. That there's research done showing that, the restoration of cognitive and attentional ability. So now, finally, we get to the possibility of connection to place. And in this case, there were some mentions earlier today in terms of places and accessibility within the urban environment, right? So we want accessible environments that are engaging, and one of our colleagues at the Center for Urban Design and Mental Health, Colin Elord, has written a book that's very interested in this particular dealing with this particular issue of engaging design in the cities. And we also flexible environments also help us, and I think the issue we were talking earlier was someone mentioned the personalization, participation, being able to call a place your own when there's flexibility for doing that. We know that that can have an impact on your well-being. So what things we can address through design, and we can look at in the existing research in environmental psychology, are things such as increase a sense of agency through spaces that are accessible, engaging, and flexible. That there could be an increase on the sense of belonging and attachment to place, as well, again, promoting social cohesion. So. When you look at the research, these are both at the community level. We know that there's a lot of research on this regarding the workplace, as well as the neighborhood level and community level, home, work, and third spaces. So that is my talk. Thank you so much.